Welcome to Outside is Magic, a podcast about the intersection of creativity and the outdoors. I'm your host, Christopher Sandagustin, and in this episode, I sit down with Anya Miller Berg, a creative director, strategist, and someone who has built a career at the intersection of thoughtful design and storytelling. We talk about her transition from architecture to brand creative and how she found clarity by mapping the parts of her work that truly fulfilled her. Anya shares how she approaches creative work like a gift, the lessons she's learned building campaigns for brands like Mountain Hardwear, and why more than nothing might be the motto we all need right now. Let's jump in. Here's my conversation with Anya Miller Berg. All right, Anya, thanks for joining me on this podcast. And I guess before we kind of jump into where you are currently, I was kind of wondering if you can just touch up on your earlier years, a tad, where you grew up. Did you kind of have a creative background at all? Creative family?
Kind of two different angles there. So I grew up in a small town just outside of Toronto in Ontario, Canada called Cambridge. And I'm the youngest of four siblings. And I guess I had a musically creative family of which I got absolutely zero talent. My mom spent many years as a concert pianist. My brother is a classical guitarist. But other than that, nobody in my family did any visual arts, really. But from when I was a really small kid, I spent my days drawing everything, kind of like redrawing cartoons. I was obsessed with Calvin and Hobbes and Garfield growing up. And I would literally just kind of recreate those cartoons and kind of make up my own stories, or just really be kind of like huddled over a desk most of the day. I just really like to draw. And, I think I always thought I would like to try to make a career out of that. But, again, being the youngest of four kids, my mom is a single parent. I also knew that I needed to kind of stand up and you know, not kind of search around for a career for too long, and kind of create an actual path to just supporting myself financially, I guess. When it came time for me to make the decision on, what do I study in university, for whatever reason, I kind of thought that architecture was this merging of a handcraft, a creative craft that also required kind of scientific and mathematical skill to have these things come alive in the world. And I guess it just seemed like a clear path to a job to me too. So that's where I ended up going.
Yeah, that's cool. When you got into architecture, was there kind of shock that it wasn't like what you expected it to be?
The shock came when I got out of school and into the workforce. So I loved the degree of architecture. Everything from the conceptualization of form and how it sits in the landscape, the study of the landscape before you even touch it. Um, I even liked structures and engineering. I really, really loved the coursework for architecture and thrived within that world. And found a lot of awesome friends and kind of mentors through my professors who I'm still friends with to this day. But then when I got out and kind of into the workforce, I immediately went into residential architecture and kind of custom builds. I was working in Boulder at the time. I just graduated from University of Colorado and worked for a really cool, progressive kind of modern architect who was working on actually a kind of, what do I call it? Like a built shaped community out in Fort Collins called Prospect Newtown. A really forward thinking, kind of modern design community that kind of existed off the grid and had pretty wild design actually for the time. He had his roots in mid century modern architecture. And I worked for a husband and wife team. I think I was their third employee or something. We worked out of a room in their house. And I think when I got into the job, it still kept being fun. I was so new at it. I was put on a lot of rendering work. So at that time, you're still not using SketchUp or anything. This was hand rendering, markers, pens, tech drawing. It was really fun. And then as I kind of kept moving on in my career, Obviously you gain more responsibility, get placed over, um, doing the technical drawings, doing an entire complete set of plans for a building, taking that into the building department, jumping through the red tape, meeting with the building inspectors, understanding that the timeline of a building project from when you meet somebody and talk about their spatial needs and their creative wants and just, where they want to be in space to like when they move into that space, it's like kind of at minimum like 3 to 5 years. And the timeline of that type of work just it didn't really suit my need for kind of like moving freshness, I guess. And I think like the tension between what you go to school for, which is like this creative concepting and yes, some of the engineering too, but like that portion of an architecture project in the real world gets shortened drastically within that 3 to 5 year time frame. So like you may spend, I don't know, 3 weeks to maybe a month out of that 3 year timeline, really hardcore concepting with a client. And that's just like not enough creative time. When you just pencil out kind of the costs of how long it takes to do things and then how long it costs to actually make the thing, the amount of time that gets left for that true creative exploration is just so truncated. You know, it took me a long time to figure out that that bummed me out. Like, I worked in architecture for 10 years, and it felt like the part of the job that I was really interested in and that filled me up the most was like the part of the job that got shortened. And I just, I think you talk to a lot of architects. I've talked to a lot of architects, my friends included, and like they're all kind of trying to get out somehow. They're like, I'm starting a furniture business, or like, I've started designing lamps, or like, yeah, I think I'm just going to go back to cooking school, or like, they're just kind of doing all sorts of stuff. And part of that is because it's in their nature. The other part is that I truly think that the people that are most suited to enjoy and succeed architecture is kind of the practice and the study of it in school are not necessarily suited emotionally to work in it in the real world because we do love that conceptual portion of the work and we love how we just get to study form and kind of spatial adjacencies and kind of how people can best like experience life through these spaces and when that part gets shortened it just kind of starts sucking our soul. So I think that's why like 9 out of 10 architects you meet are like wanting to be furniture designers or like wanting to get out of the job. So
Yeah.
I feel like that's a bit of a long answer, but yeah, that's kind of how I felt about it.
Totally. I had a similar conversation with a friend. His name's Corey Martin, and he's a principal at Hacker Architects, and I think he deals with very similar things. Is there anything like you learned from your architecture days that like you still practice today?
Oh my God, every single day. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think just one of the cool things about architecture is that you're basically creating a treasure map or, you're creating a set of directions for somebody to create something based upon at the kind of most basic level. Yes, there's all the cool conceptual stuff that I was referencing, but at the end of the day, your job is to create drawings and kind of verbal directions that are they're written down for somebody to kind of understand your intent and then create an object in the world. And I think that I guess it teaches you clarity and it teaches you that, even if you're a creative person, you need to learn how to write as well to explain what you're doing to people that may not necessarily uptake information the same way you do. So not only do you need to be accurate, but you need to be able to lay something out clearly, both just like in a visual graphic sense, but also you're kind of telling a story of the building as it gets assembled from the ground up. So you need to, you have all of this kind of communication in mind, and you're trying to make it so that it's as clear as possible what you're asking someone to do. And, I think when I work today in kind of brand creative and marketing creative, luckily I get to be along for the ride in most cases, and I get to ongoingly creatively communicate what I'm looking for in a project. But it really does help that kind of written and verbal and visual communication. Those things come together to, express what type of emotion I'm going for, either on a photo shoot or in selecting an athlete or, some sort of athletic talent that's going to be on the photo shoot, and trying to kind of imbue importance and kind of the correct kind of creative ingredients on any single project. So to me, it's really like it's like an exquisite training in creative communication. And I use it every single day.
Yeah, it almost seems it set you up to be like the perfect creative director
Oh
because
my
it just
God.
like, I mean, it teaches you like the processes and stuff that like if you come up through like the art design background, I don't really think you learn those systems that you do through architecture. So that's pretty cool.
Because I didn't come up that way, I don't know. I'm sure that there are some people just with the propensity to be able to explain why they have done something, conceptually. Um, and actually. But I think you are right that in architecture, like, the schooling for that, you basically work on a project for an entire semester. And at the end of the semester and along the way throughout, you put up your work and you explain why one form is bigger than another, or you explain why you chose to put the thing on the site where you did. You're constantly having to kind of enunciate and explain your creative decisions. And what that means is like, you don't want your answer to be like, oh, I just put that there because, well, I don't know, because it looked cool. You want to have a really good reason for it. I think it creates, in architecture, it creates meaningful and functional spaces that respond to the environment. But in brand creative, it just means that it puts more meaning and intention behind the communication and the creative that you're actually making, because brand creative in a lot of ways is like, yes, it's cool, it is art, but they're pieces of communication that you're hoping people to pick up, certain things from, whether it's an emotion or whether it's information about a product that the company is hoping people will be interested in and buy. Like creative decisions to me, like they're not flippant, they're like super intentional because they're like communication decisions. I think at times it can feel a little bit cumbersome to have so many ingredients need to go into a creative output, and it can kind of seem technical in a way. But if you toggle back and forth between like having the right ingredients and creating within kind of a structured pasture, it really lets for more freedom because there's like less questions of like, is this more right or is this more wrong? It gives you kind of, the freedom of that fenced in pasture to kind of graze around in creatively and like feel as though the communication tool you're making is still going to be right and on point.
Yeah, yeah, totally. That's really good stuff right there. I think a lot of people struggle with like, wanting just to make something cool, but taking a step back and really asking yourself why you're making it is super important for sure.
Yeah, I think, I mean, again, that toggle between like, okay, there's a reason I'm doing this, and then you switch off that kind of reasoning side of your brain and you're like, and now does it look cool? Because like you can't really sacrifice one for the other, like you need both. And so, again, that's probably part of the architecture brain too, is you're like, there is a more right reason to do something than another creatively at times. And then there's like, again, sometimes you can be like, I don't know, there's not a reason. It just looks cool. And it's okay that there's not a reason this time because of X, Y, and Z, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, totally. So I guess like next you had a pretty difficult life experience after during your architectural period. You definitely don't have to talk about it, but I'm kind of wondering like out of that, is there some kind of advice that you give to people right now that are having a hard time or trying to overcome something very difficult in their lives?
Man,
I know it's a big one.
well, the general advice would be hang on because you can probably weather it. And I'm fine to speak about what I went through. It's really, honestly, it's like a truly shaping experience. I got diagnosed with kind of an aggressive form of breast cancer when I was 29 and called triple negative breast cancer, which like, doesn't that just sound bad? I'm like, oh my God, like 3 negatives? It's
Yeah.
not just 1 negative.
Yeah.
So, so anyway, I got diagnosed with this pretty much out of the blue. I could tell that story in a minute, but I got diagnosed with this cancer and I was working at a really cool architecture firm here in Seattle called Graham Baba at the time. And for all intents and purposes, it's like the coolest architecture job one could ever get, you know? They like do urban infill and custom homes and are just like, they're a really cool group of people and still are. But at the time, they were super supportive once I got diagnosed because I pretty much just got like swept right up into treatment. And luckily at that time, I was literally living like 2 blocks from one of the best cancer centers in the nation. So I was able to like walk out my apartment door here in Seattle and like walk 2 blocks to Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center and get treated. And so I worked a little bit during my treatment time, which kind of like spanned the course of a year, but I didn't work a ton. The architecture firm was super supportive and really kind to me. And, they threw the book at the stuff. I had um, chemo first, and then then you get surgery after that to remove the tumor. And then third, I had radiation. And I kind of went through, you know, honestly, the classic cancer arc. I mean, lost the hair, got pretty sick, was lucky to come out on the other side. And I think back to my, you know, recommendations to people, like, you don't like beat cancer. You don't, I don't know, you just kind of weather it. And then you get lucky or you don't. You know, you either get lucky that the science works for you and that like the medication you were recommended worked, or you don't. And I did get lucky and I weathered it. And, it's just honestly, I just look at it as like kind of pure luck. And then also I know there's a lot of doctors that help me. But again, it just feels like such a crapshoot a lot of the time. So I did come out on the other side of it. And, I think I definitely took stock of what I was doing every day with my life. And while I, you know, was doing that, I took a look at my career and had a moment of pause to say, like, all right, why am I doing architecture? Am I enjoying what this is? Do I feel like it's a positive thing? And I actually, like, because of my love of infographics and just like hand drawing, I like sat down and I tried to do this infographic where I drew this like X baseline, which was basically, say, a timeline of an architecture project. And above that x-axis was like things that I really loved doing. And then below the x-axis were things that like I really didn't like doing along that typical, 3-year span, say, of an architecture project. And then I connected those dots with like a heartbeat line, essentially, that like went up above the line and down below the line when I didn't like it. And like a lot of the things that I was doing in that, in a typical project process were like below the line for me. And it just made it so clear that I was like, okay, I don't like as many of these tasks that go into this job as I want. And, so I kind of took a look at it and said, all right, what can I do with my skill set? And honestly, at that time, I didn't even know what to Google. Like, I didn't know jobs to Google. And I started talking to people. At the time, my husband was in school to get his MBA at University of Washington. And he had a professor who I don't exactly remember the course that he was teaching, but he was in creative strategy or brand strategy at some firm in town. And my husband, Charlie, was like, this guy reminds me of you. Like the way he explains things and the way he thinks reminds me of you. And maybe if you talk to him, he would have some information on where you might be able to go, with your job. So I kind of did that classic, like, just ask people to go to coffee and have conversations about how they got from point A to point B. And I did go meet with this guy. He was super helpful. I showed him my infographic, which I immediately felt a high level of nerdery in that conversation. But I slid it over the table to him and I was like, hey, this is kind of what I'm dealing with here. And I think even just having that like object, that like boundary object, essentially, where I just like showed him what was in my brain. He's like, oh, you seem like a creative strategist. And I was like, okay, what's that? And he explained to me kind of where that role fits in design and creative world. And so I finally had something to Google. And I did that and, looked for some open jobs. I found an internship that after 10 years of working in architecture, I basically applied for this internship that paid the same amount as like my lifeguarding job in high school did. And, I went in for the interview. I was like, listen, I've got a lot of professional experience. I don't have experience in this job, but this is kind of how I see things translating. And they kind of nodded their head. I wasn't sure if I was going to get the job. It was at a brand agency here in town that does a lot of consumer packaged goods work and brand design work. And I ended up getting the internship, which was supposed to be for 3 months. I worked in it for 3 months, and I got hired afterwards as a senior strategist. At that point, I was kind of swept into the world of like brand and marketing creative. And I really realized like, beyond just the communication skills that came from architecture, both like verbal and visual, like designing how a brand sits within the landscape of other brands and within an industry that it sits in is really similar to designing a home or a building within a landscape that it should sit in. You decide how it stands out or how it fits in, both for the building and the brand. You decide who the users are of that building or the brand. There's a lot of parallels to how architecture and brands are so similar. And so I found that like, even though I hadn't been doing the job of creative within brand marketing space, I had really been doing that. I just didn't know it. So that's kind of the story there.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that you made that timeline. I feel like everyone should do that. I'm going to do that today. It's a really good exercise.
I think it's such a handy tool. And again, like it helps other people understand your feelings and kind of also the skills that you have, and just like anything, when you kind of draw it out or you create a list, it just can bring clarity to your own thought process too. So yeah, I'm definitely an
Yeah.
advocate for it.
Have you revisited that infographic recently to ask yourself those
Every
same questions?
every now and then I'll like come across it, not necessarily to ask myself the questions yet, but I come across it and I'm like, oh my God, this is such a bad design. Like I'm embarrassed of the design of it, but it's really such a little time capsule of how I was thinking at the moment. But I think, I think that revisiting of it would be a healthy practice for me right now. I mean, I guess I am coming up on another 10-year mark or I've passed it. Oh my gosh, basically just blacked out. I've passed the 10-year mark of being in a different profession. And I think, whether it's yearly or every couple years, you kind of revisiting like, what do I like and not like about my position? It's really easy to get comfortable in things that you don't like and also things you kind of feel beholden to. Like even in architecture, like I'd put so much schooling and effort and financial commitment behind that job. So to walk away from it, it like took something like cancer shaking up my life and my perspective to say like, okay, peace out, X number of years of work and learning and dedication and like kind of take the leap and trust that those skills would transfer into something else. Like, but I guess, it is important. It's important to kind of reevaluate what you've trained for and whether it's still something that like is fulfilling to you.
Totally. Yeah, at some point we all have to take the leap.
I think so.
Around this time, like how was it navigating this new design world as a woman? Especially now you're in creative leadership. Um, Kind of curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah. It's a good question. In architecture, I was lucky enough to be in firms where there was like a lot of female representation, more at the mid and lower levels, not over top of the firms, but still those people, those women within those jobs were extremely influential regardless of their position. Because I think and I think a lot of women maybe experience this, but leadership and thought leadership and creative leadership and idea leadership comes from more than just like the title you have. It's from the work that you put out. And then sometimes that ends you up in a position where your title actually is equal to your influence. And other times it doesn't. But I think, again, within architecture world, I saw a lot of cool, strong women that I learned from on the daily. And then when I went into brand world, it felt a lot different. It felt much more, I won't use the phrase male dominant. I think that's like kind of a common phrase to throw around. It just felt more like male populated, maybe. And yes, I remember one female creative director out of like, I don't know, 10,
Really?
zero females within the leadership of the agency, except for on the sales side. There was some female leadership there. And even so, those females, not necessarily related to creative world, like in the sales leadership, their tactics and like personalities, I just didn't like, they didn't resonate with me. Like the way they led and worked just seemed so foreign, at least to like my personality. And I think the way honestly I navigated it past tense and current tense is kind of just how I've always navigated like my work life in general, was just like work my ass off, try to, you know, pour whatever creative ideas and energy I could into the projects, because I really like to love what I'm spending my time on, and then to like really care for the people and the relationships that like help me do whatever job I'm doing, and like just put time into the people around me. I guess I kind of like, I look at work and working with people and making things like, I want to give somebody a really nice gift, whatever portion of the project it is. Like if I'm going to work on it, I don't want to hand off like a handful of spaghetti that's all covered in sauce and like super messy and crappy to work with. Like I want to make something that like they kind of feel like they're getting a gift when they get my portion of the project. So whether it's a creative brief or like even just like a, set of image selection, I want there to be a lot of intent and care behind that. Because I think when people receive work like that, creative is so much like this, like it's a ball that gets handed back and forth and people put their own touches on it. And when you kind of receive a portion of work that you feel was really cared for, I think you want to put that same level of care back into it when put your touch on it and hand it back to the person that once handed it to you. So, you know, again, I know this kind of diverges from kind of like the female question. That's kind of like the way I've handled my professional life. Again, try to be good to the people that you work with. Try to work with friends. Try to make new friends with the people you are working with. And then just like treat the work like a gift that like you're making really nice things for these people around you. And then like usually good stuff comes from that, you know? And I don't know if that's an inherently female approach or if it's just like an approach of a certain type of person. But I think, at least in my career, I definitely focus less on role titles and more like what I got to do. And did I enjoy doing that thing? So where I sit right now, you know, my role is creative director. I haven't done some canvas in the creative industry on how many female creative directors there are. I don't know, but I'm thankful to be in the role that I'm in because I really like what I get to do. And I think like, you know, again, I approach work the way I just described. And, you know, I think that type of approach just has worked for me. And again, I kind of divorce that from like the gender that I am. But, you know, again, I guess I just say that influence and creative leadership doesn't just come from a role title, but I am thankful to be in the role that I'm in because I really enjoy the people I get to work with and the work that I get to touch. Honestly, I kind of racked my brain for another role title that like I would want. I'm just like, oh, I just don't know. I like what I get to do. I love what I get to do. Yeah, I'm not even sure if I answered that question, but
No, yeah, thanks for answering that. I feel like a lot of how should I say this? I feel like a lot of work can be very transactional and it feels like that you take it very personal and I think that's really cool.
I try to for, you know, it can be positive and negative, I suppose, when you care a lot about something, it can kind of take over chunks of your life, but you know, balance is a myth anyway.
Totally. So yeah, I mean, I guess we can jump into your current role at Mountain Hardwear. You're a creative director there. And I'm sure you had some amazing projects and clients on the way to get to Mountain Hardwear. Is there one that stands out that you might want to just shout out right now while we have a little bit of time?
That's a
No,
really
it's tough.
tough one because
You've
like
worked on some
anything
cool
it,
stuff.
well, I did and now it's, you know, I mean, making a portfolio and picking like the one project to rule them all is super challenging because I kind of even once I got into brand and creative world, it has felt like a series of little tiny stepstones that I kind of tossed out in front of myself or hopped to without even knowing it to get to where I am. But I think one of, you know, after my like internship turned role at that brand agency, like I realized I was working a lot with kind of big like Fortune 500 type brands that were like consumer packaged goods like Frito-Lay and PepsiCo and Starbucks. And like I realized maybe 3 years into that that it was a really great education, but like I didn't want to use my intelligence to like sell potato chips. I didn't want to use my creative to figure out which snack bag would like entice somebody to like snack until it was gone. I don't know. I think and you know, again, I don't like to carry the snack analogy. I don't want to bite the hand that feeds me too much, but I mean, I don't work in that job anymore. Although like those types of jobs really do they're an education for sure in like human behavior and kind of like how to really harness creative and conceptual like emotion around something that might not be all that emotional, a bag of chips. So I think it was like a really good learning. But the thing that I would like to call out most is probably my time with Duct Tape Then Beer. If you're in the outdoor industry, you probably know of them. But that outfit was started by a couple of my old, very good climbing friends, Becca and Fitz Cahall. And I mean, I met them right out of college, living in Tahoe, climbing, snowboarding. And I just had no idea that my life would end up taking me with that friendship kind of beyond where I was working in architecture to like working with them in their company. But you know, their work kind of ranges from documentary films to podcasts like the Dirtbag Diaries and Climbing Gold. And I really joined them to kind of build out their creative strategy and kind of brand strategy work that would inform those creative pieces like documentaries and like the podcast that they were making. My time with them, now I don't know, I think I was there over 5 years, but had kind of always been like a little bit adjacently working with them. Like even when I was in architecture, I like my husband Charlie and I like helped them like develop the name for the company and like develop the branding for the company as well. So it was really a cool experience. I got to work with so many great companies within the outdoor industry through them. I got to work with Patagonia on their kind of Bears Ears 360 launch, kind of when Google 360 was like first hitting the scene, and the Obama administration granted monument status to Bears Ears in Utah. And, um, so working with Patagonia on that throughout the tenure with that company um, through the Dirtbag Diaries, as they were a long time sponsor until recently of that podcast. I got to work on some amazing projects with outdoor research, not in its kind of current iteration of the brand, but previously got to do almost some like spoof video campaigns, like poking fun at the idiosyncrasies of the outdoors, which really to me kind of merged my like love of like sociology and just like human behavior with like creative expression. So did some really fun campaigns around like idiosyncrasies of outdoor behavior there. REI was another kind of big awesome learning experience. Within a few different projects through Duct Tape and Beer, but we got to do a film called Paul's Boots. Basically, a woman out of Australia, her husband passed away, but his lifelong dream had been to hike the Appalachian Trail. And she sent us his hiking boots, and they were a little bit degraded. Like, we weren't actually going to be able to get someone to use the exact boots through the entire trail. But we basically, as a team at Duct Tape and Beer, we assembled a group of people to kind of in relay fashion cover the entire length of the Appalachian Trail with this man's Paul's boots. And we told a story about that. And in doing so, kind of we're able to tell this story about like the through hiking community in general, about trail magic and how, what you do with your life and just kind of carrying something either symbolically or like actually for somebody for a time can like be really meaningful. And, I think like that experience in storytelling that I got with Duct Tape and Beer, and even though, a marketing campaign is not a documentary film and I can't always put that level of storytelling into it, I think just the importance of the emotion and the reason why well, I wouldn't even say why we all, because we all get into things for different reasons. You know, some of the reasons why I got into outdoor sports and like the way those things made me feel as a human and like the kind of richness and emotional growth that I found through climbing and trail running, snowboarding, mountain biking, kind of all the things that I use my free time to do. Um, I think that those, when you can kind of try to communicate those in marketing more so than just selling a jacket or pants or a puffy or anything, all of the above. Like the reason I want to be out there is to kind of feel and grow as a person. And, again, that storytelling that I got at Duct Tape and Beer, and the experience I had with that group of people kind of allows me to just like ongoingly harness those outdoor emotions that I have and kind of put them into the work I do today. So, I think had I not lived out of my van for large chunks of time, had I not worked on documentaries and podcasts, and kind of had to crystallize those emotional outdoor experiences, like I think what I do now would be a lot harder, or it would be harder to do it with like any heart, you know? So shout
That's
out
super
Becca and
cool.
Fitz.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to them for sure. Their podcast is amazing, and I think like what's so cool, it's literally changed so many people's lives, that podcast and those films, which is really cool. Well, being at Mountain Hardwear, I guess what excites you over there? Like, is there any future projects or projects that you're working on now that excite you?
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. On the short answer to that is like I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be at hardware if there like weren't tons of projects that excite me. I think just having gotten to the place where I am today and just like life and career, like I just wouldn't do it. And so I think like, outdoor creative and like especially with a consumer brand like Mountain Hardwear, the seasons are like, row your boat canon. Like they just keep starting. Like, one season finishes and like two others, three others are basically rolling at the same time. So I think one of the things I get excited about is just like the ongoing ability to like take learnings really quickly from the previous season and like roll them right into the next season. So instead of the like 3-year architecture timeline, I get like a much shorter creative timeline to basically like try to get better in. It's like the kind of fail fast and then implement learnings type vibe. So just generally with the construct of the job, it suits me really well. I really like the pace and the turnover of seasons and like the ability to have that learning be implemented right away. I think next I would say is like I just think that the team we have assembled at Hardware right now is a really unique chemistry mix of people. And the size that the company is, I mean, I think we have, I don't know, just 85 employees or something. The size of the company, the agility that we have, the kind of win that we have in our sales from um, our kind of over 30 years of tenure in the business. Hardware just, I think this year turned 32, 33. Sorry, it was 30 in 2023. Being bad at math right now, it's 32. And I think like the wind we have in our sails from the tenure of the business, but also the kind of rebranding effort that I was brought on to lead in fall of 23, it just feels like there's a lot of momentum. Like there's a lot of really talented, motivated people working not just on the creative team, on my team, like in the product engine, same thing, leadership as well. So like when any of those pieces are not in place, like it makes it really hard to get anything done. But right now, those like all those little engines are kind of humming in the company. So that just like creates a lot of excitement and a lot of motivation for everybody to kind of just like crush it, on a day to day basis, like look at work like that gift and like, as I'm making something or as I'm like trying to concept a campaign, I really am thinking about the product engine and I'm saying like, okay, I wonder if like Will and Ruth and Jess and Cindy and Ben, like all these people from the product side, would they love this? And then I'm like, hey, do you guys like this? Like I want the product people to be proud of how their product is getting represented and making sure that it's like true to the sport, and true to the emotion and the technicality that they're trying to imbue into every single thing. Um, so, I think I get really excited just to basically, again, be batting that creative as a gift kind of back and forth between my team, between the product team, so that's like generally what I'm excited about. I think specifically, like, I don't know when this podcast would come out, but in May, which is just right around the corner, I'm really excited for our sun protection campaign to launch. I've been working on it for just over a year now. I was able to partner with a group out of London called Steep Learning Group. The guys that run it are Swedes, but they live in London. I basically feel like I found lifelong friends by connecting with them and working with them on this campaign, not only through the kind of creative lens, but also just the personal lens. And I'm really excited to show the creative because it's just a new take on kind of educating people around like what sun protection is, I think. It's like a outdoor mountain forward way. That's really kind of a nerdy topic, you know? Like I come from the generation of like, ooh, I'm gonna like climb with my shirt off today so I can get a tan. And then, you know, and be like savage and wild. And then like, you know, now I'm like, ooh, maybe I'll cover up um, instead of being a little like feral sun creature. So, you know, I'm excited for that to come to life. We kind of took a bit of a like female scientist DIY approach to the campaign, and we utilized one of our really cool athletes named Liz Durstein. She's a trail runner and thru hiker. And so we utilized her creativity and expertise too to kind of be a guide to like basics about all our solar system and like the sun. And it's a really fun and interesting campaign. So I'm excited for that to come out. That's more near future. And then like far future, well, far in terms of just a few months, there is a new something or other, I'll just say, coming to market for hardware in this coming fall is, I'll just say it is a kit for skiing and snowboarding. And the creative for it is really fun. The kit itself is extremely technical. And to kind of complement that, we almost went in the opposite direction and have shot most of the campaign on 16 millimeter with Jake Price, kind of a very storied snowboard edit and storyteller and writer himself. So, you know, that is all being shaped. The clay is being shaped as we speak. And I'm in the place where it's like, it's that scary place where like, I'm not exactly sure how this is going to turn out because it's probably different than what we all kind of projected it would be. But it's the exciting place too. That's like, this is going to be sweet. So those are just some of the things I'm excited about right now.
That's super cool. So I think we got to wind down now. You've dropped so many knowledge bombs. I can't wait to go back and kind of pull these out. But is there parting words or maybe something that we should all be doing that you think we should all be doing? If that makes sense. Sorry. I know that one's deep too.
We
For
all
example,
be
like something
doing.
that I've been doing to myself and like telling other people recently is just to be more patient with yourself. We all
Mm-hmm.
want to rush through these projects and make things happen now. And I've been finally at my older age understanding things take time and it's okay.
I love that one. I'm definitely going to tuck that into my pocket for later. Okay, this is going to sound like so low bar, but like more than nothing is sometimes my motto. Like, again, I work really hard at various things, but there are some days where like I just feel like kind of drained for whatever reason. I mean, within the last couple of weeks, I had to say bye to my cat that was 18 years old. You know, just kind of life has things that are like come at you. And from a day to day basis, I'm like, if I can just do more than nothing today, and I mean that kind of spanning across everything, like, maybe that means a 20-minute jog. Maybe it means like a text to my mom instead of a call. Maybe it means like a thumbnail size doodle, not like a big drawing. Just kind of like more than nothing, make sure to kind of try to fill up your stores and your coffers, like so that the inputs you have to then like mix into all of the outputs you want to put into the world are like good and like healthy, you know? So that like the more than nothing, put some pennies in the personal piggy bank to like spend tomorrow,
Yeah.
I guess.
No, I
Yeah.
love that. More, yeah. That's really great. There was one I read recently where it was make it exist first, you could make it better later.
And I was like, yeah, love that.
Absolutely.
Well,
Okay. Well,
thank you
hey,
so much. I feel like,
yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, I didn't want to kind of ruin any sign off, but I do have a meeting that starts right now that I have to bounce to.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much.
All right, that's our show for today. If you like this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. It all really helps out. If you have any questions about creativity, process, or anything in between, please drop a comment. I'll get back to you as soon as I can, and I'd love to hear from you. You can follow along at Broken Coastal on Instagram and YouTube. Subscribe to my newsletter. It's absolutely free, a weekly dose of inspiration at the intersection of design and outdoors. You'll love it. Thanks for being here. Cheers.